say, kids, what time is it?
Hey everyone, Keith here from GeekTime TV and Confession Time, which kind of dovetails into what I had originally planned to talk about, and then I see this article that popped up today that kind of complements what I wanted to talk about. And my confession is that I finally watched Thor: Love and Thunder last night. Wow. It was really bad. It was really bad. And I'm not here to do a review of Thor: Love and Thunder almost a year after it comes out. No, instead, it's just an overall critique of how bad the Marvel Universe has gotten, how bad the MCU has fallen. I've only seen 3 of the feature films that they've put out since Endgame. That doesn't count Spider-Man, which was the last one, No Way Home. Yeah, No Way Home, I guess, because that's really a Sony movie. I'm talking about Black Widow, Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness or Madness of Multiverse, and Thor: Love and Thunder. Just all 3 were abysmal, very difficult to sit through, tedious, and the quality of not only the storytelling but the CGI, the action direction, everything about it has just slipped drastically. If you go back to Phase 1 and you look at what they were doing there, and you come to where they are now, Phase 4 and into Phase 5, just abysmal. So I wanted to talk about this story that came up yesterday. Excuse me, but then today I see this on Bounding into Comics from John F. Trent. So I'm going to kick it off here, and then we'll kind of go down the rabbit hole a little bit and kind of talk about what's going on over there at Marvel Studios. So, rumor, Kevin Feige to abandon Marvel Studios wants to be number two at Disney. So, buckle up, buckaroos. Here we go. A new rumor claims that Kevin Feige is trying to move up at the Walt Disney Company and become number 2 in charge at the company.
Who does number 2 work for?
This new rumor comes from the Ankler editor, Jeff Snyder, during an appearance on John Roca's Hot Mic show. Snyder believes that Feige will leave Marvel Studios following the release of Fantastic Four and X-Men into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. My thing is, he's going to wait that long? Really? I think he should go now. He says, I do think you get Fantastic Four off the ground, you get X-Men off the ground, and you leave. He goes on to indicate that running Lucasfilm might be a possibility before stating, I've heard that the job that Kevin has always coveted was that of Alan Bergman, who is basically like number 2.
Who does number 2 work for?
That's right, buddy. You show that turd who's boss.
Snyder continued, I think that may be Kevin's thing, being the creative absolute head of the studio, who can put his fingerprints on everything, oh, has he ever, and leave maybe the business stuff to someone in the Iger type of seat who has to oversee the parks and the cruise ships and all this type of shite. And Kevin would just love to be the top of Disney, period, for creative. So Kevin's the top. Oops. Snyder later asserts, basically what I'm getting at is that Feige wants to be the number 2.
My name is number 2.
He aspires to be more than just head of a label. Not that Marvel's a label. It is. It's a full-blown studio, as is Lucasfilm, but you know what I mean. Lucasfilm, Marvel, they still, at the end of the day, report to Disney, sadly. I'm interjecting that commentary, by the way. Those are Disney-owned, he added. Yeah, that's a travesty that they're Disney-owned. Interestingly, a previous rumor from May 2021 from Variety's Brent Lang and Matt Donnelly claimed that Feige was perfectly content to stay at Marvel Studios and had no ambition to go to Lucasfilm and lead Star Wars.
You want to run things here?
No, not at all.
Huh? You want to be daddy? Is that it? Number 2, you want to wear the daddy pants? Huh? You gonna cry? You gonna cry?
So there's that. But here's the thing. We all know, and I probably should have pulled this up, but I didn't, that Kevin Feige has talked about all this wokeism that he was injecting into Marvel Phase 4, where he said he wanted to add more women characters, and he ended up tripling the women to men ratio in these projects. He wanted to kind of play the DE&I card. He rewrote the end of WandaVision because you can't have Doctor Strange come in and save the day. You can't have a white cis male explaining things to a woman. So even though he is the Sorcerer Supreme, or was, so Kevin Feige's the one who kind of rode them off the rails. So I'm not so sure he's the genius everyone makes him out to be. Gary from Nerdrotic has stated all along that when this thing kicked off, it was Jon Favreau who kind of had the overall idea and kicked it off. And before Disney bought it, Kevin Feige was getting a lot of help from a lot of places. He used to work with Avi Arad. It's been a trickle-down effect, and I'm not saying that he didn't learn something along the way, but to give him sole credit for what they accomplished, and it was a major accomplishment, I agree. And to have one person kind of coordinating and funneling all those movies and making sure the continuity, that was all brilliant, and I'm sure he did a lot of that. But as far as where he's taking it, now that he's in full control, is alarming, to say the least. And now he's talking, or it's rumored that he might be leaving. Let's look at this chart right here. It's talking about how Ant-Man and Wasp: Quantumania is performing worse than any of Marvel Studios' releases last year when it comes to box office grosses. The film has only grossed $127.4 million domestically so far, and a meager $287.8 million globally. So this chart here shows the last 4 releases from Marvel Studios: Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, Thor: Love and Thunder, and the new Ant-Man movie. Ant-Man is the green bar down here, so you see where it is, but it's already, the trajectory is definitely playing out to be the least grossing of these previous 3. Black Panther up here domestically over $400 million, along with Doctor Strange just barely tipping that $400 million, and Thor coming in at about $350, it looks like. Continuing on top of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania performing worse than anything Marvel released in 2022, the 2022 releases had anemic box office hauls as well, especially compared to their predecessors, with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness being the exception. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever brought in $854.8 million compared to Black Panther's $1.3 billion total global gross, and that's not adjusting for inflation. So there you see Black Panther: Wakanda Forever coming in at $854.8, and there's the original Black Panther in 2018, $1.3 billion. Continuing, Thor Ragnarok also had a higher global gross compared to Thor: Love and Thunder, bringing in $850.4 million compared to Love and Thunder's $760.9 million global gross. Again, also not adjusting for inflation. Interesting note, Thor: Love and Thunder's production budget is estimated to be $70 million more than Thor Ragnarok. So here we got a tear sheet here. See, Thor: Love and Thunder production budget, $250 million. That's insane in the membrane for what I watched. That is insane. That was a pile of crap. And Ragnarok had a production budget of $180 million. So not only are Marvel Studios films seeing significant declines at the box offices, but the more recent films are also some of the worst reviewed films from audiences. On IMDb, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania has a 6.5. That high? Really? That's the 3rd worst rated Marvel Cinematic Universe film. It's only better than Thor: Love and Thunder and Eternals, which are tied for worst rated films, with both receiving 6.3. Very generous numbers there. Other releases such as Black Widow, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, Doctor Strange, and the Multiverse of Madness are in the bottom 10 rated films at IMDb. So we'll see what happens here. This is just a rumor. Don't shoot the messenger. Every time I put a rumor on here, I get beaten up sometimes in the comments. We're just hypothesizing. This is just fun. This is what fans do. But let's move on to something that's not a rumor. This came out yesterday in The Vulture by Chris Lee, and he spoke to 3 anonymous visual effects artists that worked on the new Ant-Man, and they're not happy. So apparently it's been getting roasted in the reviews for the horrible CGI, along with it, just a terrible story. So we have 3 employees here that have been renamed with pseudonyms to protect their identities. First up is Jim, who's a VFX technician who's worked on more than half a dozen Marvel movies series, and says many of his experiences working for Hollywood's most reliable blockbuster factory have been positive. Okay, so let's see what he says. In terms of priority, Wakanda Forever was definitely at the top of the list. All the money went to that. All the best resources went to that. It's understandable given the context with Chadwick and everything and how the first film did. But it did diminish the ability to carry Ant-Man all the way through. For Ant-Man, there were a lot of editorial changes happening toward the latter third and fourth of the project that were just too late. There's a point of no return. Why certain things were changed, why certain notes were nitpicked longer than they should have been, that's on Marvel. But it definitely did cause a lot of tension, turmoil, and weight on everybody at Company Name Redacted. Unfortunately, it is noticeable that there were shortcuts. Certain things were used to cover up incomplete work. Certain editorial cuts were made to not show as much of the action or effects as there could have been, likely because there wasn't enough time to render everything. There was a lot of shortening and rolling of shots. So rolling is when you will, you don't shorten or lengthen a shot. You just kind of move it to take up a time space over a previous or ensuing shot, just to affect the cut overall and basically usually hide a mistake or something. Back in the days of tape, we would do that to hide like a dropout on the tape, if people go back to videotape, you remember you get like lines would show up or something. Sometimes we would have to actually do that to hide that. It really did feel like certain scenes were trimmed or otherwise altered to either save money, save time, or cover up the inability to get it done. This is the sad part. Why didn't we push back? You don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize your livelihood in the slightest, so afraid of getting fired. Part of that means when an executive decision comes down the line that says, this is what we're going to do, you just assume you don't have the power to say anything against it. You can't be all like, well, that's kind of shitty. Shouldn't we do something better? Because that'll never happen. A lot of us are sitting here thinking the money is there. Why is it not coming down? Marvel spending a bit more money to pay more VFX people wouldn't make that much of a difference for the executives all the way at the top. Again, these guys will never cut into the top of the line. When you look at a budget, top of the line are all the producers and all the DP and the director, and all of them are taking their cuts, and they don't want to get that taken away. So whatever's left below the line is what you have to work with. And if they're going to do reshoots, if they're going to change things, they're going to have these CGI artists working overtime, they've got to take it from what's there. They're not going to take it from the top of the line budget. Because why would they? But if it comes down to them not being comfortable with their bank numbers and us working until burnout, we lose every time. Yeah, you will. Honestly, I equate it to human greed. So, kids, you want to get in show business? Let's keep going. Overall, I think what they came up with is satisfactory. It's a good placeholder for the beginning of Phase 5. But I think there was so much potential for this story, for the visual effects in general. I think the movie is getting the reviews it's getting because Marvel is doubling down as much as possible on constricting quality. They're squeezing blood out of stones, and we're out of blood. And just to piggyback one last thought on this before we move into the next person, I used to run a professional organization. We'd meet once a month in the production world here in Connecticut, and I would get calls from an unnamed network asking if I had burn interns for them for certain upcoming seasons and things like that. So they would call me specifically looking as basically I was some kind of recruiter or something. I'm not, but asking for burn interns. What a burn intern is exactly what you just read, what you just heard. They will work you until you quit. They'll just beat on you and beat on you and beat on you until you quit because there's a line of people all the way down the street waiting to get in. Let's move on. Ted is a veteran Oh my God, I can't talk. Ah! That job tech who has worked on several mega budget superhero movies and streaming series. He decries overall working conditions in the VFX industry, which involve a lot of unpaid overtime and unrealistic deadlines, but has no major qualms with the Quantumania production. But this thing, unpaid overtime, that's a shame. When I charge overtime, I make sure I get it. Unrealistic deadlines, though, that comes with every form of production out there. Whether you're doing a TV spot or a documentary or a feature film or a television show or a corporate video, there are always unrealistic deadlines. I call them phantom deadlines. But that might be on the Stanford no-no list now to say phantom deadline. It's probably illegal now. I'll have to check that. Check the speech police, please. Speech sheriff, is that illegal? I don't know. I don't care if it is. I'm saying it anyway. Phantom deadlines. Ted says my experience on Quantumania was comparable to the majority of productions we, VFX specialists, work on, and therefore not especially bad or difficult. I wouldn't say other projects necessarily took priority or that morale was particularly bad, although one of my coworkers actually became unhappy because of the lack of work he was given on that movie. He spent days on standby, only to end up doing nothing, and this went on for months. Our working conditions are often less than ideal, and Quantumania was just another in a long line. Yes, it's a factory. These things it's become a factory. I mean, I think at last count, Marvel put out something like 13 projects in the last 18 months or so, 20 months. That's just insane. And you can see, I mean, look at the CGI in the She-Hulk show. Look at it goes all the way back to Black Panther even in 2018. I remember sitting in the theater going, what in the world am I looking at the end of that movie? It was terrible. Let's get to the last one. Connor has worked as a VFX artist on several of the biggest superhero movie franchises of the last decade, including a number of Marvel's biggest blockbusters. During post-production on Quantumania, the effects house employing him was concurrently working on Black Panther Wakanda Forever. And he kind of reiterates what the first guy said. Wakanda Forever took precedence. It felt like the higher-up and superior roles were shifted around to put that on their plates, and there was a smaller team working on Ant-Man. It was on the back burner, less of a pressing thing. Maybe the director had an idea of what he wanted, but he wasn't 100% clear. We had a rough environment that we were sticking a few main characters in. At that time, we weren't told where the characters would be in that environment. We were just going with what felt right. Well, that sounds kind of insane when you have a $200 million project. Then there were times when we were creating an actor's entire action, Ant-Man moving across something, and you just think, why didn't they film it the right way? Or how they wanted it in the first place? Why are we having to redo and recreate? Why do we have to Frankenstein together an actor's performance? Yeah, exactly. That whole axiom, fix it in post, has gotten completely out of control. And the whole idea that you have digital tools makes it somehow easier does not hold true. You get these guys who don't have the foggiest clue of what they're doing in the post-production world, and they're not making life easier for the people on the other end. There's a famous old saying, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. And, there's only so much you can fix when it's not properly shot and planned for in the pre-production stages or even the production stages. It sounds like a lot of this is being made up as they go along, and that's really ridiculous when you're at this level of production.
And I'm just going to assume it all went to plan. What?
Let's see what he says. A quick shot that maybe takes 2 seconds would have to be redone 20 times to get the look that they want. There was a lot of reworking, a lot of inefficiency. I ended up taking over and reworking a large portion of other artists' work, which is not how things usually go when you're working for other studios. I haven't seen the finished movie yet. There were some cool sequences we were putting together that seemed promising. Oh boy, seemed promising. But there could have been more people involved on the project. Maybe more money spent. With a lot of these projects being worked on simultaneously, resources become thinner. The quality starts lacking. You can't expect all of the VFX companies to give the highest quality work, especially if you're going to do it on a lower budget. So, sadly, I remember there was an episode of The Simpsons back when it first came out. It was probably season 3 or 4. I don't remember which. Simpsons fans, don't jump on me for this, but It was about the Itchy and Scratchy cartoon and how it was made, or the Itchy and Scratchy movie, maybe. And they go to the animators, and they're in like Korea, and the people are behind them sticking bayonets into their backs. Draw, 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 and that's a lot of what this sounds like. So real quick, this kind of piggyback down here. There's related articles, and I'm going to post these in the description below so you can go read these for yourself. I'm a VFX artist, and I'm tired of getting pixel effed by Marvel. And this one came out this past summer, and I know a lot of the bigger YouTubers have talked about this already. But this kind of goes hand in hand with what we're talking about here. And today's rumored news about Kevin Feige just is this perfect trickle down, especially when I just watched that Thor: Love and Thunder. And one of the things that jumped out immediately to me was the awful CGI, just awful CGI. Like video game cutscene bad from the year 2001 CGI. Just terrible. Like, and just the whole idea that I'm thinking of this one shot in particular, if you've seen the movie, where Thor is doing he's got his feet on two, what are they? I guess they were ships. I don't even remember now. It was just stupid. It looked ridiculous, and it's cartoony. It's cartoony, and it just immediately takes you out of the reality. And I know we're dealing with comic books and superheroes, but I've been reading comics since I was 10 years old. I go back to like 1979, so if you do the math, you know how old I am. There's some wacky ass crap in there, but it doesn't work when you translate it to screen and make it look that goofy. When human bodies do things they're not supposed to do. Anyway. I'm a VFX artist, and I'm tired of getting pixel F by Marvel, also by Chris Lee. I won't go into this one too deep, but there's an interesting portion in here where he talks about they bring in directors from independent films. And this is something, it's interesting when they say that. I'm just trying to find it real quick. Let me see. Well, there's a couple of things I want to talk about in here. Here's a good one right here. He says, part of the problem comes from the MCU itself, just sheer volume of movies it has. There you go. It sets dates. It's very inflexible on those dates and quite willing to do reshoots and big changes very close to the dates without shifting up or down. This is not a new dynamic. No, but there's that whole thing. I remember I've always was told when I was younger to do quality over quantity. When I was doing laborious jobs in high school or even out of high school, and you're trying to go real fast and put as many units down as you can. And I remember the boss or the shift manager coming over and just saying, "Hey, slow down, take your time. We want quality, not quantity. We want to make sure this stuff is actually working, not just shoving it out the door." And that's an important thing. And I think that's where they're going with this Marvel universe. I mean, I went back last night talking to my daughter, and we looked at how when this started, it was 2 movies a year, maybe. Some years there was 1, and now they're getting up to 3 movies, 4 movies in a year, plus all these Disney Plus shows. It's out of control, and they're just stretching their resources too thin. And it doesn't sound like there's a whole lot of continuity anymore, really. Let's see. The main problem with most of Marvel's directors aren't familiar with working with visual effects. There you go. Now, remember what I said at the beginning. This started with Jon Favreau. Jon Favreau's made a lot of big budget tentpoles. Jon Favreau understands how to work with visual effects. But as slowly as the phase 3 came to an end.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin phase 2 of our evil project. Or is it phase 3? I don't know phases.
The Infinity Saga was wrapping up. We saw them starting to promote a lot of independent filmmakers to take over these giant movies, because let's face it, they don't really have to do much. They might direct the actors a little bit, but the action's kind of almost on autopilot at this point. But the problem is you don't have the visualization to take into the post-production, and then you don't know what you really want. And you haven't set up your camera angles the right way. So let's just continue with this paragraph, and then we'll wrap it up. He says, a lot of them have just done little indies at Sundance Film Festival and have never worked with VFX. They don't know how to visualize something that's not there yet, that's not on set with them. Kind of what I just said. So Marvel often starts asking for what we call final renders. The final renders are death for people who don't have the ability to pre-visualize, because what happens is they tell you to do a final render, which takes a long time, and then they look at it and say, nah, that doesn't work. We got to fix this and this and this and this, because they can't pre-visualize. They have to see it done, and this is what kills a VFX artist or a motion graphics person. As we're working through a movie, we'll send work-in-progress images that are not pretty but show where we're at. Marvel often asks for them to be delivered at much higher quality very early on, and that takes a lot of time. Again, that's kind of what I just said. For people who cannot pre-visualize, I've given people what we call a radio cut, which is, say, in a documentary type piece. It'll just be a bunch of interviews all chopped up and all jump cutted with nothing. No graphics, no music, no nothing. And what I get back is, this really needs music and graphics. I can't watch it like this. I'm like, just close your eyes even. Just listen to the content. I want to make sure we're on the right track content-wise before we polish it up. And when you work with people that can't do that, it's very, very frustrating. Because then when you polish it all up and then they want to make all these changes, it's a lot more work to move all that stuff around than it would be if they just caught it at the beginning. Moving on. Marvel does that because its directors don't know how to look at rough images early on and make judgment calls. No pre-visualization skills. But that's the way the industry has to work. You can't show something super pretty when the basics are still being fleshed out. So there you go. One more. He says the other issue is when we're in post-production, we don't have a director of photography involved. So we're coming up with the shots a lot of the time. It causes a lot of incongruity. A good example of what happens in these scenarios is the battle scene at the end of Black Panther. Hey, I thought I mentioned that. The physics are completely off. Suddenly the characters are jumping around doing all these crazy moves like action figures in space. Suddenly the camera is doing these motions that haven't happened in the rest of the movie. It all looks a bit cartoony. Oh, my chicken wings are done. It has the broken visual language. It has broken the visual language of the film. So, interesting. A lot of interesting stuff going on over there. Needless to say, I think the conclusion we can all draw from this is that the MCU has fallen from grace. It is nowhere near the level of product it was when it debuted in 2008 with the first Iron Man. And that leads me to one last thing, and I'm going to need your help with this, guys, because I just don't have the energy to do this, I don't think. But I went to IHOP with my daughter for breakfast, and they gave free ticket to see Ant-Man Quantumania. And it's free, and I know that, but I'm really just not. Like, I can't bring myself to get the ticket and go sit in the theater. I haven't watched any reviews. I see the tone of the reviews. I saw the Rotten Tomato score. What do you think? Should I do it? Should I go see it? I mean, I kind of know what I'm getting into if I go. Don't think I'm going to enjoy it if I didn't like Doctor Strange, Thor, Love and Thunder, or Black Widow. You tell me what to do. Leave it in the comments below. That's it for me on this one. I'm going to go get my chicken wings out of the air fryer. I'm starving. Please smash that like button if you like this video. Please leave a comment below. We'll get a good discussion going on this maybe. Please subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and share it out if so inclined. You guys have a great night, day, afternoon, morning, wherever you are, and we'll see you on the next video. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up below. Also, please subscribe to GeekTime TV. It really helps us grow the channel. And make sure you hit that bell icon in order to receive notifications every time we drop new content here. You can also check us out on social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at GeekTimeNet. Thanks again for watching. We will see you soon.
Say, kids, what time is that?